All right. Good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you find yourself. Thanks for coming by. Sorry for the slightly delayed start. I was just getting together some stuff for the stream tonight. Before I forget, I just wanted to address the super chats from the last stream. So we have from Paul Cornelius for $5. Thanks for the good work, fellas. Appreciate that, Paul. From Chris B. Thanks for the nostalgia. Here's a contribution to your nappy fund piece. So yeah, if you missed the last stream, we were talking about sort of the good aspects of millennial culture, because believe it or not, I think there are some nuggets worth preserving. And from Bolero 393, he said, "I hate that all male characters on primetime shows slowly become stupid or effeminate or knuckle dragging or woke. It has bled into other parts of culture with predictable results." Yes, I would definitely agree with that. Also, thanks to the new subscribers on Subscribestar. I got a number of new donations, and I really appreciate that, guys. Also from Merjan Karsten, who sent a super chat from the Netherlands, which I think is Merry Christmas in Dutch. So I don't know if that's your name or if you're just being friendly, but I appreciate it, brother. So anyways, without further ado, we'll get started. The way we're going to organize this is we're going to go forward. We'll take a break in the middle, and then at the end, we'll answer questions. If you have any questions for myself or Father Ananias for this evening, please, you can send them as a super chat, and we'll answer those first. And at the end, we'll just sort of go through with the general questions. So tonight, we will be discussing Orthodoxy, and I am very happy to be joined by Father Deacon Ananias. All of the links for his stuff can be found in the description of this video. I believe I linked to his YouTube channel, The Norwegian Noose, which I would highly recommend you guys all check out. So, Father Deacon, how are you doing tonight, sir?
Oh, blessed. Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here with you and to be able to get to talk about Orthodoxy.
Awesome. Yeah, no, we're very excited. Can you tell us a little bit about your, just so that everyone can kind of get to know you a bit better, what is your current occupation and what is your history with Orthodoxy?
So my current occupation...
Oh, and how is a deacon different from a priest?
yeah, that's always coming up. So my occupation in the secular world is a professor of philosophy. I teach at Carroll College, which is a small Catholic liberal arts college here in Helena, Montana, and I also teach at Fullerton College Online, which is back in California. And that's my secular profession. And my religious profession, obviously, I'm clergy in the Eastern Orthodox Church under the Romanian Episcopate, Archbishop Nathaniel. And so that's currently what I do as far as occupation and apologetics and stuff like that.
Awesome.
And a little, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, and I was going to say, and were you raised Orthodox or did you convert later in life?
No, so my background, I was born in Minnesota, a Norwegian American family. And in Minnesota, everybody's, there's a huge percentage of Lutherans. So my father's side of the family, we're all Lutherans. And then we came out to California when I was young to be with my mother's side of the family. And I kind of was brought up, we stopped attending Lutheran church, and I was brought up religiously by my mother, who for a while, because my grandparents on my mother's side were Church of Christ, which is a kind of restorationalist church, and she kind of broke off from that. And then we started attending a non-denominational evangelical church known as Calvary Chapel that many people might know. And so primarily I'm trying to remember, as far as I can remember, like maybe sixth grade through high school, I attended a kind of a evangelical non-denominational i.e. Calvary Chapel. And I had extreme problems with that. I hated it. They didn't like that. What helped me was being introduced to philosophy and Christian apologetics my senior year. They helped me kind of start thinking through these things. It kind of gave me the tools. And so I kind of began my search because I knew that there was something incorrect about kind of evangelicalism. Prior to receiving the tools, it was just kind of an intuition. I didn't really know how to interpret those things, those feelings. And then with philosophy and Christian apologetics, I was able to kind of work through that. And I moved kind of more liturgically. I came back to my Lutheran roots and was catechized and was very active in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. I also was educated at a Roman Catholic liberal arts college called Thomas Aquinas College. So I was exposed also at that time to Eastern Orthodoxy, both in reading the Fathers and meeting Eastern Orthodox priests. And I started working through a lot of these issues at a deeper level, theologically, thinking about, the real presence, ecclesiology, the history of the church, the canonization of scripture. And eventually, I wasn't ready at that time. It took me about 14 years before the first time I was exposed to Orthodoxy and attended a liturgy and was studying it to when I actually came into the Orthodox Church. And that's primarily because to come into the Orthodox Church is not simply an intellectual exercise. Studying can help, but you need a certain level of humility. And miracles to come in to be open to see the truths. And so I had become disenchanted with the Lutheran Church, watching how much it had changed, especially liturgically. And then I started just kind of mixing stuff up. I was like, well, I hadn't found, there were still things about the Lutheran Church theologically that I had liked, but I didn't have liturgy, like high liturgical. And so then I was going to like high Anglicanism and going, okay, I'm a Lutheran, Anglican kind of. It was just a big mess. But that was all kind of setting me up to then, have many different things that happened to my wife and I in our life and suffering that kind of humbled us to the point that when I did come back and experience the liturgy, we had a miracle. And that was the end, my fighting. And I was received and illumined within the church. And that was 2013. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really cool, man. Yeah. My, I guess, technically I'd be a catechumen at this point, but it's been sort of like one of those long-term catechumens. But I grew up in Alaska. I spent my whole life there. And Alaska is odd compared to the rest of the United States because compared to the rest of the country, as I'm sure you know, it has a relatively quite large Orthodox community there. So Orthodoxy was always kind of on my. It was on my radar more so than most people, just because you see the Russians walking around and they got their regalia and they go to a Russian Orthodox church, but you think that's just you don't even really know what it is. You just know that's kind of like for them. It's kind of in my mind it was more of a kind of an ethnic religion.
I thought the same thing too. Yeah.
Yeah. But as I got older, I was I was only ever really a kind of a non-denominational evangelical. But then I kind of had, as I think many people do in their early 20s, not a kind of a falling away. And but not entirely. Like I still believed in God. I still professed myself as a Christian, but I had problems. Let's just put it that way. Like I was kind of flirting with deism a little bit and so on and so forth. But what eventually happened is when I decided to go back, kind of come back to the Lord, I remembered in university, I had a friend who I really respected a lot, and he was an Orthodox Christian. And I was like, and I studied history in university, and I was kind of, I had read a little bit about it. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to an Orthodox church, because prior to this, I was thinking maybe I'll, try a Catholic church, because, being a fan of history and whatnot, and sort of the rich, cultural tradition of the West and all that sort of thing. There were things about Catholicism which I appreciated, but, no offense to my Catholic listeners, I never could get on board with it for a number of reasons, which we'll probably get into. But Orthodoxy, to me, based off sort of the living testimony of my friend and a desire to sort of find what was most true with the early church, kind of called me, I guess. And I attended my first liturgy at a small Antiochian church, St. Herman's Orthodox Church, Antiochian, in Wasilla. But the priest there is from Eagle River.
Eagle River, sorry, right.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I think he's also got a congregation there as well. So the priest comes down and he does them on Sundays. He'll do divine liturgy and matins at this little small. It's literally like a log cabin sort of structure.
That sounds so nice.
But it was great. I went there, and it's and I would say the majority of the congregation are converts, and it was done in English, and they had a homily and everything, but the whole structure was still liturgical, still I'm ranking on my the liturgy of John Chrysostom, and it was my first experience of attending anything kind of like that, and I felt like I just sort of walked. Like I walked into a log cabin and I entered like something else, something more spiritual than I had sort of was accustomed to. And I'd basically been kind of interested ever since. So that's kind of me and sort of where I came from, spiritually speaking. Now, I guess sort of going on a little bit to our discussion that I sort of had, that we kind of talked about ahead of time. I got a question for you. I think I accidentally closed my list here. I don't know why I did that. It's ridiculous. But okay, here it is. So number one, what would you say makes Orthodoxy similar to other branches of Christianity? Other, let's say, main branches of Christianity. So maybe mainline Protestantism, Catholicism. What kind of holds it together as definably Christian?
I mean, a lot of things from the creed. I mean, I don't know if every single mainline kind of Christian denomination holds to the creed, but roughly speaking, maybe not in the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church.
Right.
I mean, there's certain things in there, or whose kingdom shall have no end, which is a kind of a response to Chileanism. But let's say one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and of all things visible and invisible, and one Lord, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the only begotten of the Father for all ages, light of light, very God of very God, begotten, not made. So you carve off a bunch of other sects right there.
Right. Yeah. No Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. One essence, the Father. And so, and then there'll be other parts in the creed. Obviously, they'll separate, those who embrace in the West, the filioque. But I'd say generally that kind of, that Christ is of one essence with the Father. He became incarnate, dwelt among us, the Trinity, that, all are God, fully God, and the distinct mode of their persons, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That I would also think that most mainline Christians believe in the inspired text of the Holy Scripture.
Yeah.
That most would probably say they're infallible and errant, at least in the manuscripts, read the original manuscripts, and that they're profitable for instruction, teaching, etc., and that they are the apostolic witness of the life and teachings of Christ. And maybe it ends there. I'm trying to think if there's other. That's probably it, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a really, let's say, a really watered down kind of creed or something like that. So it's Trinitarian. They believe in the incarnation, that Christ is uncreated, that he's fully God. He's the only begotten Son of God who eternally has proceeded from the Father.
Right.
That's probably what we have in common.
Yeah. I would agree. Yeah. So Trinitarian, and like you say, with those other details, they believe Jesus Christ is Son of God, is God, and that the Bible is the Word of God.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, depending on what denomination you are, they may or may not believe that the sacraments have some sort of life-giving quality.
The other thing I forgot too is that Christ, the part of the creed, that Christ was crucified under Pontius Pilate, suffered, was buried, and raised again from the dead, and the general resurrection, and the judgment, and that Christ saves. Now, it's obviously what that means and how Christ saves is going to differ, but that would be added to. I would add that in there too.
Well, I think those are all good points. So those are the things that kind of roughly, bind Christendom broadly construed together. Now, in what ways would you say Orthodoxy is different specifically from Catholicism? Because, in kind of the circles of the internet I run in, there's a lot of, trad Caths, and there's a lot of Orthodox, and, they'll kind of like butt heads a little bit. But, in the sort of like kind of more traditionalist or reactionary political corners in the internet, those are a lot of the sort of guys you find, and they'll be from the outside or from sort of skeptics or people who kind of want to see a more traditional sort of society, but they lack faith. To them, they'll see Catholicism and Orthodoxy as very much largely the same. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. So kind of for the lay person or the person who's not read up a whole lot about this, what would you say are the major differences between the Eastern Orthodox Church and Rome?
Well, let's start with the similarities, and then we'll depart from there as far as the differences. So there's a millennium of shared history as being part of one church, one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, in communion with one another. There's 7 sacraments. There is the priesthood, right? Apostolic succession. There is the traditional belief of the real presence of the Eucharist, and that the sacraments are efficacious. I guess we both have incense, wear vestments. Let me try to think. Iconography, although you may see less of that in Roman Catholicism now. Right. Let's see. Somebody had asked me this question the other day, too, and I kind of went through similar. Anyways, let's just say that covers kind of the major things there, because we got the 7 sacraments, apostolic succession, a notion of apostolic succession, definitely a hierarchical and authority which is binding upon the people at various levels. Again, the shared history, a canon that's very, very similar. We have a few more books in the Old Testament canon, but as far as departing from what would be obviously very different is, first and foremost, what kind of is the major source of the division and split and schism that we mark at 1054 would be the addition of the filioque. And various other things that were added. So the rejection of pedal communion. Let's see. The notion of indulgences, meritorious kind of notion of salvation, kind of more of a juridical kind of movement into mandatory celibacy for priests. I mean, these are all things that the Roman Catholics, as Old Rome, as Orthodox, didn't practice and were added later. That would become innovations that would become a problem. And obviously the major one is through kind of, especially once you get to the time of, the Frankish influence and the kind of power, like the donations of Pepin, the donations of Constantine, that starts to reconceive the Bishop of Rome in a very different way than the early church had viewed it, to be universal. And we've always held as Orthodox that the Bishop of Rome had a unique status, but not in the way that Roman Catholics would define it now, is kind of universal and supreme jurisdiction, and a kind of monarchical. And also the donations of Pepins would kind of give him the mixing of kind of worldly rule as well. And, the later things, what we would call the papacy, right, is that it started changing from being Western Latin Orthodox into what we would call a religion of the Pope. It seemed to be defined. Notions of development of doctrine would be fundamentally different. And a major difference also would be, and this is part of what kind of led up to these issues, is that in the Latin West, the way that they began to start to do theology was fundamentally different than the churches in the East, that started with revealed faith first and foremost as the grounding of all things. God is the Lord who has revealed himself to us. And then philosophy and these other things became secondary. In the West, they had a tendency to actually put philosophy and metaphysics first, especially the kind of close relation with Greek metaphysics and philosophy. And that began to shape the way that they actually started to think both about God, the Trinity, and these various theological issues in a very kind of Greek way, as God as monad, which eventually leads them to actually kind of conceiving of the earthly kingdom in a kind of a monarchical, monadic way, as the office of the Pope is supreme pontiff and universal bishop above all. That the Orthodox said, we've never heard, this is not what was taught by the fathers or practiced and believed by all people everywhere at all times. And so those would be kind of the major differences.
And what is the filioque?
The filioque was in 690 in a synod in Toledo, Spain. And it started off, and by the way, I'll just plug this book. It's not my book, but
of course, you can plug it if it's your book too.
Edward Shasinski. Yeah, and he was a Uniate when he wrote this. He eventually became Orthodox, but for any Roman Catholics out there watching the channel, it's not a polemical work whatsoever. It's, why can't I get this correct on the camera? It's a very academic, work that just, in an unbiased way, just kind of goes through the history of the controversy. And to be fair, the Latin West had added that to combat Arian subordinationism, to make it clear. And the Filioque is just in the Creed, the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed, where we say, and I believe in the Father and the Son. I'm blanking on the Filioque is,
it's the Spirit proceeds.
We believe because I always have to say the whole creed together when I try to find
me too. I gotta start at the beginning. It's like the Scouts, the Scouts law. Like
with the Father and I believe who proceeds, the Son who proceeds from
the Father.
Yeah, and with the Father and Son is worshipped and glorified. The Holy Spirit, that proceeds from the Father.
Yeah.
With the Father and Son together is worshipped and glorified and spoke to the prophets.
And the Filioque is that the Spirit proceeds
and the
from
Son.
the Father and
the Son. Yeah.
Okay.
So I believe the Holy Spirit, the giver of life, who proceeds from the Father, who with the Father and the Son together both worship and he spoke through the prophets. So they added that, the Holy Spirit who proceeds from the Father and the Son. And so there was this whole controversy that, well, one way that could actually be correct. It just means you have to kind of qualify. Well, what do you mean by that? Is it an eternal procession where there's a double cause that eternally, God and the Son are actually causing the Holy Spirit to proceed? Or is there a sense of economia that the Holy Spirit proceeds solely from the Father, but is sent through the Son, or from the Son? That's fine. That part's fine. But it was, are there two causes? Is there a double procession that was kind of debated? And it wasn't quite clear at the beginning. And I think what happened over time is, part of the problem is that the Latins didn't read or speak Greek, and many of the Greek fathers didn't speak Latin, right? So there was kind of indeterminacy of translation that was going on. The Greek words, I would argue, they had various Greek words that were more nuanced that could be used for making these distinctions of what type of procession it was. That when that was translated into Latin, they didn't have that. So they only had one word, and that became the source of confusion. And as you see through history, kind of the Latins kind of double down on these concepts that box them kind of in a corner, to the point where then it actually becomes what the Orthodox would argue is actually that's heretical. We have to have the Father as the monarchia, the sole cause of the procession of the Holy Spirit eternally. And that became a huge issue. And then obviously other issues that came up about the role of the Pope and this sort of authority and how he was to be seen would be brought into question as well.
So the issue with the Filioque essentially is that it risked, maybe not explicitly so, maybe not with the intention, but it risked subordinating the Holy Spirit. Is that essentially it? Okay.
That's right. So two issues. A a kind of rejection of the synodality of the, the church would need to come together to fix something like that, or, add something to the creed. So obviously Rome was already starting to kind of give an idea of a rejection of the synodality and conciliarity of the church, and giving more, and you really get this in the kind of Frankish, right? And you just kind of have this both ecclesiastical and worldly power that's kind of given to the Pope that's foreign to the church. And that kind of is an issue with the filioque, that, Rome doesn't have to look to the other churches. They could change. Right. And then an issue with regard to the theology of it would be heretical. If you have a double procession and a subordination of the Holy Spirit to the Son. So Gotcha. That's kind of, it's much more difficult than that. I'm trying to just kind of gloss over it real quick.
Oh, no. These are these are very big, very, very lengthy topics to go over in detail. So no. I agree. And, if there's any Catholics out there like raising objections or whatnot, like, we hear you. The purpose of this is to sort of inform maybe the uninitiated about some of the differences and similarities of Orthodoxy, and to we could debate what it is.
Yeah, we could debate these issues, later in a different time, place.
Oh yeah,
but it should be agreed by all that that's what the issue is. Right. These are the issues. I don't think anybody would accuse us of misconstruing that.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. All right, so moving on to the next one, and while I'm pulling this next one up, if you guys have any specific questions for Father Ananias or myself, you're welcome to leave those as a super chat, and we'll read those during the break or at the end. So let me go here. So now, how is Orthodoxy different from Protestantism? Now, of course, the problem is there's no such thing as Protestantism. There are many, many, many Protestantisms, right? But I guess generally speaking, how would you say the Orthodox Church is distinct from, let's just say, like, even like,
or we could just do commonalities that of all the groups at which we'd call Protestant and Neo-Protestant, mainline and non, what is it that they all would share in common that would be different from Orthodoxy?
Right.
So they would all, I would say, the rejection that there's actually a visible authoritative church whose decisions are binding upon the individual. That they have an authority that's hierarchical, and that was established from Christ and carried through in an apostolic succession. That would probably be, and this ties into the next thing, their view of Scripture. So for us Orthodox, our epistemic starting point, so the way that we know anything, whether it be about theology, the life of Christ and the teachings of Christ and the apostles, the church, or anything in general about the world, which we say we believe we know things, would be first and foremost the apostolic deposit of faith, the church, at Pentecost and what was revealed and carried through. That is the revealed faith. So as the Epistle of Timothy states, it's not the Bible that's the pillar and ground of truth. It's the church, right? It's that precedes both, and in terms of knowledge, an epistemic priority and in time before any written scripture. That would be a huge difference between where the Protestants start with the Bible is, and forgive me if I offend anybody, that's Protestant, but the Bible in a very Quranic way is kind of the literal dictated words of God on paper, and that's the starting point for all theology, all knowledge, everything that, and that the Bible has authority, that not men, like not men of God, or an ordained, church and bishops through the apostles or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a very key point. Because I remember it was when when I realized this, it was like, oh yeah, it's obvious. But it was kind of a radical departure because in my own thinking, because I always held up the Bible as like the supreme authority, but then you realize, after doing not even that much digging, that where did the Bible come from, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was written down by people who had, divine revelation, or God told them to write it down. But how did it become canon? The church decided which books would be in and which books would not be in. The church existed before the Bible. The church made the Bible. And what is this church? And why did it have the authority to do this? So then it gets answering all these questions. Now, of course, the Orthodox hold the Bible in great esteem, right? Like the other denominations, we believe that
we would
Bible
even probably say it's the Word of God, maybe not the exact same way a Protestant would, because
yeah.
We say other things in the church are the Word of God too, like icons are the Word of God too. All the different kind of things that you use in the church are the Word of God.
Exactly, yeah. And the Bible is to be revered, and it's like you say, the Word of God, but the way in which we understand the scriptures and try to apply them, and the place of the scriptures within the church, that I think is a bit different than the Protestant, or it's definitely different than the Protestant understanding. The Protestant understanding is, I have the Bible, I'm going to sit down and read it, and the Lord's going to tell me what it means. Yeah. Whereas the Orthodox understanding is like, I have my Bible, I'm going to read it. I'm not sure what this means. What does the church say it is? Right. And I think that's a very key, big difference, and an important one, and prevents a lot of heresy, probably.
Yeah. And, oftentimes the way the Roman Catholics will argue with Protestants, I don't know if I'd necessarily argue this, that it's just a priori impossible without the church to understand anything in the scripture, that you need the magisterium. Like Roman Catholics will tend to. Now, I'll argue it certainly makes it, you might get it right, but it makes it extremely difficult. And the reason why you come up with a bunch of different interpretations is because you do lack a tradition and a history and authority within your so-called church. But what I think the biggest issue is the very notion of authority. And I've thought about this, that it doesn't make sense to me to even say a book can be authoritative without a body or group of people endowed with an authority to enforce it. So it'd be like saying,
like the
imagine
Constitution.
Imagine there were no judges or nobody to actually enforce this Constitution. You said it's authoritative. It's like, I don't even know what that means. It's a very strange way of speaking, because part of the issue of authority is that, what happens when people read the Constitution in different ways, and people do, that, I guess there's nothing a priori impossible that somebody couldn't get the correct interpretation, but there's no authority in the paper, the Constitution itself, that could solve that, because part of what it means to authority is that it's illegal and it's binding, right? It's more than just I got it right, that you have to actually believe this. So imagine with the Constitution that you have the Supreme Court justice and then myself, and that we're both looking at some issue going back, appealing to the Constitution. And let's suppose that I actually get the right interpretation of that, of the Constitution, and how that should be applied.
Mm-hmm.
And so do the Supreme Court justices. What's the difference? My knowledge is not binding on, it's not law. The Supreme Court justices have a power that I don't. And this becomes particularly relevant when somebody has a different, right? Or it contradicts, let's say, my interpretation of it. Again, my interpretation of it is not binding upon all of you. The Supreme Court is. And so this is another commonality in Protestantism, is what they call the right of private judgment. Now, Protestants often get this wrong and think, well, you have to filter, through your subjective lens too, and you, the individual, to know what's right. But that's not the question. I'll even allow that, yeah, it's possible that you could actually get it correct. The major difference is you don't have a normally binding authority, and there is none. There is levels of kind of notions of authority or something like that in various branches of Protestantism, but not normatively binding, such that when your interpretation comes in contradiction with the authoritative body, that the authoritative body is legal, and you're bound to it. So it'd be like, it doesn't matter what, you're wrong and you have to follow, in the same way that the Supreme Court. Protestantism doesn't have that. They'll say, no, if we respect authority and blah, 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 let's say we even have elders, or, let's say maybe Lutherans have bishops and stuff like that. They'll all agree that, well, what happens when it contradicts your conscience on doctrine or scripture? They would be like, no, your right of private judgment trumps their authority. So what that means is they have no normatively binding body. There really is no kind of authority that binds. That is not ever present anywhere in the history of church. In fact, it's the opposite. That Christ, gave that power to the apostles, and the apostles gave it to the bishops, such that anyone could be wrong, but when they come together, right, as you see in Acts, when they come together in a synodal and conciliar way in which the Holy Spirit is present, they represent the entire Catholic Church, and it's binding on you. I think that's an important point to drive home. So I just be like, who cares about that? Yeah, you cause problems with for you getting the right understanding of Scripture, and the reason why you come up with all this different stuff is because you lack that. But it's not a priori impossible. The main issue is you have no authority that's binding on, and so it's ahistorical. That's not what the actual historical church ever had or believed.
I think that's a very important distinction. The idea of not only hierarchy, but binding hierarchy. And, of course, universality, right? Mm-hmm. So what we have should apply to basically, all believers, essentially. And I think, most Christians would probably say that, they would prefer to see their denomination be top dog. But the issue is that sometimes, they're willing to sort of, there'll be things which they don't think are very important, but kind of are. And they'll be like, you know what, you can sort your issue out, brother. The Lord met me in Baptist church, and the Lord can meet you in Catholic church, and the Lord can meet you in, Lutheran church, and so on and so forth. So it ends up creating not exactly spiritual relativism, but kind of.
It is. I think it is.
It is. It does invite a certain degree of spiritual relativity. I think we see, there's an interesting idea that in kind of right-wing political internet, that certain like modern progressivism that you see in America is essentially a type of puritanical heresy brought to life. And I look at it and I kind of see it and I'm like, it's not. I'm not entirely sure if I agree, but I see sort of why they could go that way. And I could not see a similar sort of political movement coming out of something like Orthodoxy or like Catholicism. It's got a very certain specific kind of puritanical New England congregationalist egalitarian sort of worldview. So I think all this is sort of tied together. And if you think about it that way, you sort of see kind of socially speaking how this is important for society as well. So
yeah, I've argued too. I taught 18th, 19th, 20th century socio-political philosophy class, and there's sections that we went over on the Protestant Reformation political thought. And a lot of these authors and scholars actually argue secularism comes out of Protestantism, and that this kind of over politicization, that's out of the Reformation because of Luther's kind of two kingdoms doctrine and stuff like that. And although the reformers were thoroughly religious, one thing that Dante Germino, the author of the book that I was using, pointed out, there's a fundamental change in which between the modernity and the Reformation and the people of antiquity, is that the people of antiquity everything was theocentric concerned. And that what you start to see in modernity and the Reformation is, although they're professing Christians, everything started to move to more anthropocentric concerns. And so the theology was reduced to the political. And now you get to the point where everything's kind of political, politicized. That comes out of the Reformation. Secularism, what the Reformation did in an attempt to actually destroy authority of both and overturn both the kind of tradition of the nation and the way they conceive the relation to the church, and the church itself eventually leads to atheism and secularism. Even though they were professing and they didn't think that they would do that, ideas have consequences and bad ideas have bad consequences.
Oof, that's harsh.
Yeah, I'm sorry. By the way, here's another accusation that people, well, you want the call's a denomination. We're not a denomination. That's another thing. We're pre-denomination.
Right.
Okay, there were no denominations until Protestantism. Okay, so that's incorrect. And then we say, well, you just want your sect or denomination to be, as you'd mentioned, right. That's triumphalism or something like that. But that would be the fallacy of begging the question. But that already presupposes that your position is correct, that there is no fullness of faith maintained by a visible institution established by Christ and the apostles, and maintained unchanged in doctrine and practice through the last 2 millennia. But that's just an assumption. You'd have to prove that. That would be like saying, and it isn't triumphalism if it's true. I mean, if you had a mathematician and professor, and he's teaching the students, and he's like, look, this is the right answer. It's true if and only if, in reality, that's actually true. And let's say all the students are like, well, I mean, isn't that kind of triumph? I mean, you and your group, I mean, you've got the right answer and everybody else is wrong. well, if it's true, that's right. That's not triumphalism. It's
No.
That's the nature of truth, is that it is divisive. It necessarily excludes imitations, partial truths,
and wrong answers,
and wrong answers. So I don't. Again, that just reveals from the other side, from the Protestant, and even I would argue with the Roman Catholics too. You only say that because you're begging the question. That would only follow if you actually are able to prove, and you didn't. You assumed it. Your position and interpretation is correct on that.
Yeah, there was actually this great quote from an evangelical pastor I liked years ago, and it was that truth by definition is exclusive.
Yes,
and I think that's absolutely true. 1 and 1 can be 2 or be 3, but it cannot be both. So I think that is absolutely right on point. So now, I guess sort of last question before we sort of break and answer some questions. How would you address the papal claim that Orthodoxy is in schism with Rome?
Well, let's qualify that. They would say we're the schismatics.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So both of us agree, like, we're in schism.
Right.
But you mean the claim that we're the problem, we're actually schismatic. So again, it's the same problem that I think Protestants take. They don't actually go, and this is why I always encourage people to study the history. And if I actually could quote without the Orthodox getting upset with me, because you know what? Even heretics can be right on some stuff. So Cardinal John Henry Newman said that, who is a Roman Catholic, that to be a serious student of church history is to no longer be Protestant. And so I encourage people to actually go to the beginning, right? Immerse yourself in the very spirit of, don't go in with a presuppositional commitment to some principle that's 1600 years later, or as I argue with the Roman Catholics, 1800 years later, on the Vatican I kind of notion of what the church is and the Bishop of Rome is, and then use that so notice it's something later in history that become their epistemic priority, and filter that they then go back through all of church history or the Bible and then read, because then you're just going to, it's kind of like the way that we would write papers, right? I already got my thesis. I already have my mind made up what I want to argue. Now I'm just going to go through the research and ignore all the quotes that don't fit that, and then pull together and put together a case. That's the wrong way of doing it. And so,
but we've all done it at least once.
So again, the Protestants doing that, it's like, well, wait a minute, you're taking an epistemic principle from 1600 years later about what Scripture and the church and faith is, and then you're going and rereading everything and going back. No, start from the beginning, as presuppositionally neutral as you possibly can, and get yourself into the kind of what's going on here, absorb it all. What we would call as Orthodox the consensus of the fathers, because we believe that, no bishop, no father, no Orthodox Christian is infallible. They can be wrong, and they have been. Some of the greats have been wrong. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that every single one of them has to agree. That's not what consensus means. When you look through the history of the United States, let's say on a particular interpretation of law, it's very clear, even if not every judge has agreed, what a consensus means. There's this kind of a spirit and ethos of that, right? That's the same way you want to actually go through and read the history of church and the fathers open, without the pre-commitments and presuppositions of later historical principles that you adopt. Go in and start to go, what is it? What is the consensus? What is it that's practiced, believed everywhere at all times by all in antiquity. And what you will find is that, no, this notion of the papacy, the filioque, the various things that we would say are the innovations of Rome are not present there. They're only present there to you if you start with a kind of Vatican I glasses and then go reread. That's why they have to cherry pick so many different quotes. It's a hard case to make, and I know this because even becoming Orthodox, I had put epistemic principles of my own philosophy, science, scholasticism, Thomism, Aristotelianism prior to the faith. And, I argued for theistic evolution, and, I even did political things like, well, no, Orthodox, it's really kind of anarcho-libertarian and like all this, right? And what I had to do is like,
Jesus was an ANCAP.
He was an ANCAP. But what I found is it was really hard to go through and actually argue that case because the reality of the situation was not such. And so there was kind of a coming up against reality. So I had to kind of cherry pick and build my case. I think that becomes particularly evident among not only Orthodox that try to do stuff like that, like I had done, but Roman Catholics and Protestants, right? That you put your ideas and your philosophy first, and then you actually have to argue really hard to actually build a case. That is not the way the faith of the historic church and the fathers should actually be. So what I encourage Roman Catholics is dig into the history. That's the only way to do it. Yeah. Without those kind of unfounded, pre-commitments. And I'd also say, kind of following St. Vincent of Lérins kind of canon that, we hold to what was practiced, believed everywhere by all, kind of universality, and at all times, right? And notion of antiquity, that, well, wait a minute, what's really interesting about the ecclesiology of Orthodoxy is that it isn't papism, that it's actually autocephalous, that they act as independent heads. So Jerusalem and Antioch and Alexandria, they're not involved in each other's affair. They may not even get together unless there's a serious problem. So yet they all independently maintain the same faith and same practice without this kind of influence happening. Then what you really have is, it's not a he said, she said. Well, I don't know, there's Rome and then there's the Orthodox Church. The Orthodox Church isn't just one church, right? It is one, but it's also autocephalous. It's many. So
it's Alexandria, it's Antioch, it's Jerusalem. Yep.
It would be more like this. You have 5 friends and they're all fighting. There's a fight, right? And you think it's a he said, she said. So Bob's arguing with Jim, and he was like, "Oh, he went and he changed all this and lied about it." And the other one's like, "Well, no, he did." Right? And let's say they're all friends. They were friends for a long time. Right? Well, that's actually not the analogy for Rome and the Eastern Orthodox Church. It would be, yeah, but the other 3 friends are going, no, Bob came up with this crazy story. So it's actually 4 against 1. And they didn't conspire together at all. They all kind of came together and were like, well, no, that's not how our childhood was, right? Who would you believe? So let's say they weren't in kind of contact. They come together and there's some fight about how their childhood was between Bob and Jim. Bob says this and Jim says that. But then the other 3 are like, well, wait a minute, Bob. That's not how the story went. That's not how, that's not a perfect, like, apodictic, infallible argument. But it would certainly be to you that, wait a minute, I don't trust Bob. if the four friends that grew up that haven't been in contact and haven't conspired to make some story are all saying, oh, Bob changed the way that we grew up, like the story about how we grew up. That's not actually true. That is a more apt analogy for the schism. So I'd throw it back and be like, well, wait a minute, who's from schism from who? Who's the schismatic? The four friends are saying you made up this story and did this stuff. I think that's a powerful argument. And so I'd argue that no, both. I think you have a level of objectivity that's available to all to be able to actually dig through the history. You don't have to presuppose the Orthodox Church is right or the Roman Church is right to actually that it's theoretically and practically possible to actually go through the history and figure out, well, who changed and who they have the authority. Did the person have the authority to do that? I think it just strengthens the case when you're like, yeah, but the four friends, the patriarchs, who weren't conspiring together and who were autocephalous and not influencing one another, all said that it's Rome that's incorrect. It's Rome, you're the schismatic. So that would be my response.
That's actually a really good analogy. I've never thought about that, but when you put it like that, I'm like, that is actually, I think, a helpful way to think about it. And I think, yeah, that what you said earlier is the best advice to anybody, I would say, Catholic, inquirer, whatever. Just look at the early church history. It's all there. They wrote it all down.
Yeah.
You can see how the church was structured, and you can find good sources. There's both before and after the schism. So sort of seeing how this sort of situation evolved and how people saw it early on, and then sort of how the Orthodox responded to it from the various sees, right? And responded to what Rome was doing. So I think that's a great point. So we're going to stop now, take a quick break. It looks like we got a PayPal here from Alexander Petrovich sent in a PayPal. Thank you very much. I do not see any text with this, so I think this might just be a tip. Alexander,
Oh, cool.
If you have a message that you wanted me to read, you can send me an email. It is found on my About page, or you could send it to me in the chat, and I'll look for it at the end. So thank you, regardless. Next, we have a super chat here from, let me go back and find it. I saw it. It was a while ago. Here we go. From Philly Procrit for 35 South African rands. All right.
That's good.
Does the Lutheran understanding of sacramental church, meaning church being produced by the word Christ, tie into the idea of the church as authoritative? I'll let you handle that one.
Okay, what does Lutherans always say? Word and sacrament is what, but the Lutherans only have two sacraments. Their understanding of the sacraments is going to be different. They do have a notion of authority, but not as explained. The authority is not normatively binding upon, because that actually, the right of private judgment goes back to Luther when he's answers, it's not wise to act against your conscience. Here I stand. God help me. I can do no more. That's actually where the doctrine comes from. So we have to be very clear. What do we mean by church? What do we mean by authority? What do we mean by sacrament? And that's something that's going to come across again, and all the different kind of sects of Christianity. We might use the same word. I mean, I'd even say with Jesus, and Christ himself. That's why it's so important. Who do you say that I am? A lot of evangelicals will say, well, you just need to believe in Jesus. And then that's not what Jesus, who Jesus, how Jesus, where do I find Jesus, right? The Jesus that tells you to pray to his mother, to venerate and kiss icons, because Christ does say, if you love me, keep my commandments. The Nestorian Jesus, the Apollinarius Jesus, the Arian Jesus, right? And I mention a lot of that because most Protestants will actually adopt some heretical view, either a kind of a Gnostic, a Nestorian, an Apollinarius view of Jesus Christ. So just because you can say the name doesn't mean that we're talking about the same person, the same entity, and also the very notion of the word belief. When we say believe in Jesus, we mean something entirely different than Protestants. It's not a mental assent, right? It's entire life, and it's the entire faith of who Christ is, some of which is delivered to us in the scriptures, but far more, as scripture even testifies, of the teachings and life of Christ are not recorded, as the apostle says, for if we were, the seas wouldn't even be able to contain the volumes. And guess what? Then St. Paul says you actually have to follow that. So that's one of the problems when you reject the visible authoritative church. You don't even know who Jesus is, where to find him, or what he's actually teaching. That's a problem. So that just kind of goes back to, no, we don't have any very similar notion with that of authority of the church, nor the sacraments with Lutherans as well. I mean, they do have a notion of that they are efficacious. But yeah, the rest of it, no.
Okay, excellent. Now we have another super chat here from Isaac Miller. Father, for $5. Thank you very much, Isaac Miller. Appreciate it. It'll help me buy nappies, as I said earlier. Father, what books or other resources would you recommend to introduce young people who are very inculcated in our modern society to the Orthodox Church? Well, as you think about that, the one book that I read that was a help to me was called The Way. And it was I'm trying to remember the hold on, I'll find the title of it for you, or the author's name, but it's called The Way. It's an Orthodox book.
Is that Callistus Ware? No,
it wasn't Callistus Ware. It was
The Way. I know what book you're talking. I'm looking on my library to see if I can find it.
Yeah. But anyways, there was 2 books in the series, and it was kind of I guess I would say it's written for somebody who is, it's not super high IQ, but it's not dumb either, is the best way I can put it. It's very thorough, and it was very thought-provoking, and it relied a lot on history and all sorts of stuff. And it was a very, very good book. And I'm trying to remember what it was called.
Type it into your science machine.
Yeah, my science machine. I worship science. Yeah, science made me this. Science made me the computer.
That's right.
Yeah, wasn't no Jesus. Why was it called though? Hold on, I know exactly. I have the book actually on my Kindle somewhere, but I think the Kindle's dead. The Way.
I can look up on Google real quick if you want me
book. To. Here we go. I think I've been brought to that level myself. The Way book, Orthodoxy for Protestants. There we go. Now, yeah, because there was 2 in the series. There we go. Okay, here we are. Yes, okay. The Way. The book is titled "The Way: What Every Protestant Should Know About the Orthodox Church" by Clark.
Clark Carlton.
Carlton. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I knew that one's actually good.
Yeah, that one was very good for me. And there's another one
there's another one he does too, actually.
Yeah, there was this one was written specifically for Protestants, but there was another one that was written for Catholics as well, and I think it was released by the same publisher. But that was very good, and I would highly recommend if you come from a Protestant background and you are interested in Orthodoxy. That is not a bad place to start. Yeah, that would
Yeah,
be
it
my
just depends
advice.
on what type of person you are. I get asked this question all the time, so I kind of got to figure out like, what's your background? What type of person are you? What's your kind of style? And because again, if it's somebody that's like a professor that's asking me, I'm not, I'm obviously going to be like,
Or
okay, I'll recommend
agnostic, yeah.
an agnostic.
Maybe nihilism or something by Stephen Rose.
I try to, I also try to do kind of multifaceted. By the way, this is another good one. These truths that we hold.
These truths that we hold.
Yeah, it's not very exciting, but it's it goes through like notable fathers of the early period. It mentions the 7 ecumenical councils. It talks about the various churches and the jurisdictions throughout. It talks about the different. It talks about the liturgy, the various things that are going on in the liturgy. It talks about the various things that are actually in the church, the different service books that we use and the history behind that, the various feasts. It's kind of like, this would be almost like a more kind of encyclopedia, like you're referencing. So it gives you a lot of good information. Also, the Orthodox info .com on the web. That's kind of cool because they'll actually have an index thing that you can be like, for Protestants, for Baptist, various questions that you have. It's indexed really well. I would also I'd probably recommend various YouTube videos. Somebody did mention in there Father Spiridon Bailey, obviously Father Seraphim Rose, but I'd also recommend the Icon documentary. To understand Orthodoxy, I really believe that
I've heard that was really good.
Theology of the Icon, which, for depending on what type of Protestant you are, that might actually be something difficult for you to approach and understand, being first exposed to that. So that really helps, because we would say that iconography expresses true theology and teaching about who Christ is, how we're saved, and these various things. So you can't actually become Orthodox in just an intellectual assent. You have to be able to approach through the vehicle of the icon and understand what that is. So that's good as well. And also, I always like to kind of couple that with digging into the lives of the saints. As far as YouTube videos, Trisagion Films has a whole section on various lives of the saints that they do really well. And it just in a practical way, I've talked about this before, that, religion should do something, right? A religion that does not reach you in your suffering, does not transform you, is, I think, for everybody, without getting into the details of what religion, everybody would be like, well, that's useless. I don't want. So, part of salvation is that in the end, you really do get what you want. If you want Christ, there is a place for that. If you don't want, people aren't going to be fooled and be like, well, I finally knew that they didn't want that. And so I encouraged a friend who he became Orthodox, but his parents were kept pressuring him and doing guilt trips. They're Protestant. And so he'd kind of go back and forth, did I do the right thing? And I just took a really pragmatic, I'm like, I don't know, look at the Protestant church. Do you like the type of people that they produce? And I'm not saying that there aren't great, wonderful Protestants.
Right.
But I'm just overall look and the type of person. So even the very best of them, right? That maybe you're like a Dietrich von Bonhoeffer or something like that. But then I said, if you want that, right, and if it's successful at producing it, I'd argue that Producing somebody like Dietrich von Bonhoeffer is pretty rare in Protestantism. But then look at the lives of the saints, the Orthodox. How many of them we actually have? Do you like them? Is that somebody that you would like to become? If so, we have a program for that. So you could also think of it very pragmatically. These are programs that will make you or not make you into something. And one way to see, I would say, who Christ is how he transforms the worst of sinners, and how he transforms the lives into the saints. And who those are, we get to know who Christ is by they who have become one with Christ. And I think that's very powerful, that you start to get into that. And it's like, that's somebody I'd actually like to become. Me personally, I don't want to become anything like what Protestantism produces. That's one of the reasons why I'm Orthodox. I want to become like the saints. And that teaches me about how to become like Christ.
That's awesome. Now, next one we have from Seth L for $5. Thank you very much, sir. Father, what are your opinions on the Western Rite beyond the abuses of the Antiochian Archdiocese and the use of post-schism heterodox practices?
So it's valid. I'll make that first point. There was a purpose why you need to understand why it was introduced to that. That was introduced for those who are Roman Catholics and Anglicans who were brought up in a Western right understanding and their faith, to help them better come in. It's my opinion that I could be wrong on this. I didn't think it was a permanent, like, you have two choices that you could do. I think that this is just me personally. Aesthetically, I don't like it. I do believe it's valid. I've been to, but I don't feel that. It does seem a bit strange to me that, well, unless you were kind of brought up in that, and that's kind of help. It's valid and it's legitimate. It's helping you understand Orthodoxy. It's strange to me, just personally, like, why somebody would actually choose that when you have the Byzantine. There's certain things that I think. I personally believe, this isn't dogma or anything. It's just as Deacon Ananias' personal opinion. I believe that aesthetically, that and the fullness of theology is in the kind of the architecture, iconography of the Byzantine style and music and stuff like that. And so I think the fullness is there. But I think it's good. I think it's good that we have it, as long as you don't get those abuses. But I'm not sure if that's supposed to be like it's a permanent thing that you get to pick and choose. And yeah, my concern is kind of the stuff that's going on in the Antiochian, these kind of post-schism, and that a lot of people who, even in the areas, the Western rites that haven't had these kind of post-schism heterodox practices, a lot of them actually end up then going to Rome, and I don't know, exactly why, but so I just have some kind of reservations. But to be said, it's valid. You can go, but personally, I don't actually prefer it. I think it's lacking in some things. It's both not lacking and lacking in some things. If that.
Gotcha. No, I understand. So mostly aesthetics is kind of what you're getting at. Not necessarily. And
I'm not anti-Western too. Like, that's the other thing is, my culture is Western in one sense, as being American.
Right.
And descending from Europe and stuff like that. I love Western art and even the Western saints and stuff like that. So it's not a knock against Western, but I just feel that aesthetically, there's so much more theology that can be taught of the fullness of the Orthodox faith and the Byzantine style. And so
Okay.
it is a personal, opinion. It is valid. So you're allowed, if you get something great out of that, and that's really helping you go further into Orthodoxy, then God bless you. That's great.
Excellent. Now, thank you very much for the super chats, guys. We're going to continue on now. Just want to be conscious of Father Deacon's time. So let's go on. So how closely...
we don't have time up here in Montana. It's it's forever light out. No, I'm not that far north. Yeah.
you're not back to
I'm
you're
not
not in Norway.
Circle, yeah.
You're not in Norway
Yeah.
anymore, huh? Not in the old country. All right, let's go back here. So it says, how closely do the teachings and traditions of Orthodoxy compare to the early church? So again, some of these questions I wrote up. I mean, we kind of sort of answered some of these, but I would say,
don't ever make me repeat myself. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, it's no problem, man. But yeah, so I wrote some of these questions specifically in mind because I know there's some people who I know who are kind of searching, right? They're not even necessarily Christian, but they feel like God's kind of, they feel a spiritual pull, a call. So how would you sort of answer that question to somebody? So somebody who's like, I feel like the Lord's, bringing me to Christianity, but I'm not exactly sure to go. How do the teachings and traditions of Orthodoxy compare to the early church?
So we have to distinguish, there's the tradition, what we'd call the apostolic deposit of faith. That's the teaching of the apostles, of which some of that was recorded and collected and authorized by the Orthodox Church. That's what we know as the Bible. And there's lower, so that's what I would say, that is the tradition. That's the apostolic deposit of faith. And I'd say we kept that. We've kept that unchanged, uncorrupted, and preserved in the episcopate of the Orthodox Church in its pure form, such that the gates of hell would not prevail against the church. As far as lowercase, and by the way, I should just read, this is really cool, the Synodicon, because this really is what we're talking, capital T tradition. Well, what is the Orthodox Church? What is that apostolic deposit of faith that you're talking about? Well, the Seventh Ecumenical Council and the Synodicon states, well, it's as the prophets saw. So now we're making, it's the same faith of our forefathers, right? The Old Testament. As the prophets saw, as the apostles taught, as the church received, right? Pentecost. As the teachers of the church express in dogma, as the inhabited world understands with them. So this kind of universality, like it was made manifest, right? To, especially after Pentecost. And I don't know if you guys know this, Pentecost being a Jewish holiday, 50 days after like we say after the Pascha, everybody, so Jewish people had to make a pilgrimage on Pentecost to Jerusalem. So you had the entire inhabited world there. When the Holy Spirit descends and they start speaking, the apostles start speaking in all the various languages of all the people. So this is expressed, the inhabited world understood, they saw, they in their own tongues. But it's not just a human institution. It's a human divine institution. As grace illumines, as the truth makes clear, as error has been banished, so as people come up with things that weren't taught and weren't practiced and were not received, the error is banished. As wisdom makes bold to declare, as Christ is assured, as So we think, so we speak, so we preach, honoring Christ, our true God, and his saints, in words, in writings, in thoughts, and sacrifices, in churches, and icons, worshiping and revering the one is God and Lord, honoring them because of their common Lord, as those who are close to him and serve him, and making to them relative veneration. Here it is. What is the capital T? What is the apostolic deposit of faith? What is the tradition that the Orthodox Church has preserved unchanged? It's the faith of the apostles. It's the faith of the fathers. This is the faith of the Orthodox. This is the faith that established the universe. It's a cosmic glue. So prior to even any people, that
sounds so much cooler than most people would put it. This is the faith that established the universe. I love it.
That's right. It's literally what gives being, and what was, it's the word of God. It's Christ who spoke in the universe, who leapt into existence. That is manifest through the true preachers of true religion, the Synodocum says, and we praise them as brothers, right? We have a communion with them. And we, those we long to have as our fathers, they're our mentors, they're our teachers, and to the glory and honor of the true, we say it's the true religion for which they struggled and laid down their lives. I find that a beautiful kind of synopsis about what the Orthodox faith is in the capital T tradition. Now there's then lower T tradition. So there are certain things that liturgically that might have developed. This is going to be a really boring book. Nobody would want to, unless you're like a super nerd. But
only for the very high IQ.
the Typicon. I got the light shining on the Typicon Decoded is and it kind of shows the various services of the church, from the matins to the vespers, and various things of the liturgy, and how small little things were added. That the different melodies, so we all do the same tones, but there's different melodies that could develop. The iconostasis was something that obviously in the New Testament church that people were having in their, it was actually rich people's homes. There was actually an altar, right? So it's not what Protestant think, a home church. It very much looked like a church. It was a sacristy, an altar. There was a separate room for catechesis, right? There was a baptismal room, a fellowship room, and different stuff like that. And those would be smaller T traditions. We're like, well, when did the iconostasis come in and why? The notion of like the repeaters and stuff like that, things in the altar. So those things you could have like minor changes, but they're all rooted within. And actually, the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom was solidified and has remained unchanged ever since the 4th century, 5th century. It hasn't gone. So there's those kinds of things. But when we talk about the dogma and practice and belief and the unity of the church, capital T tradition, the apostolic faith received and preserved, it's identical with the early church. That's how we know it's the true religion, the true faith.
Awesome. No,
am I too long-winded, by the way, and too preachy?
No. I mean,
okay.
This is great. This is why I asked you on. I'm like, I need someone to go into more detail than I could give with my little snippet answer. No, I was just scanning some comments. You know how it is hosting these things sometimes.
Oh yeah,
like all these windows open. But no, I thought that was great, and I was just going to add. I was just going to add one. Just sort of anecdotal. So me coming in with the snippy answer. For me, it was one of the things that I read that sort of helped kind of convince me of orthodoxy was the, I think it was the testimony of Justin Martyr. So this is a guy who wrote in I believe it was the 1st century, or it was at the very least, it was in the 100s AD. So we're talking definitely centuries pre-Constantine. And I read what he was describing Christianity was to the emperor. And I looked at it and I'm like, this doesn't look like this doesn't look like my evangelical church. This looks like Orthodoxy. And then when you combine that, and praise God that we have all these
and he actually describes the liturgy, like,
in pretty good detail. And when you compare that also with other writings, like Saint Ignatius of Antioch, who sort of describes sort of how the church hierarchically is sort of structured and whatnot, and how you have these certain offices back then, which are preserved today in the Orthodox Church as the church grew, right? And as I just looked at these things, I was kind of more and more convinced that, and it's hard, I'll say, for my part, I still think like a Protestant sometimes, but I just got to slap myself and be like, no, Dylan, are your cultural hangups and the way that you think things should be done, is that supposed to be above what is literally true, right? The literal revealed faith, word of God, and the lived tradition of the church for, going right back to the beginning. And also certain other things like iconography. I remember I was looking at some Protestants and whatnot, they'll get hangups about the icons. But I remember there was a wonderfully well-preserved synagogue, actually, in somewhere in the Middle East, in some city, which I think it might have been, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a synagogue. Yeah, I think that was it.
Oh no, Deuteropus.
Yeah, but there's a you can find the pictures online, but it shows a very well preserved Jewish synagogue, and the whole interior, is lined with icons in a manner very, very reminiscent of what you find in an Orthodox church. Also, the vestments, right? The vestments have their rooting and tradition in large part to kind of also these older. Exactly. So these are
when I vest, I actually do. We do some of the same prayers, right? Like I'm putting on my cuffs, and like it goes back to the Hebrew temple.
Exactly. And so what I found in Orthodoxy and comparing it to sort of the early churches, it's not a rejection, which is literally what you find, and again, I'm not trying to throw any barbs at any of the Protestants, but it's not a rejection of what came before. It is a fulfillment of what came before, both in the Old Testament and in the lives of the apostles and the gospel. So I guess that would sort of be my answer for that. Going on. So,
but I'll just pick up on that. I think that's really important too, is that, again, you'll see a lot of people in the chat too, and different Protestants. They're always like, well, let's go to the Bible. Let's go to the Bible. Well, that doesn't solve. It's kind of like the whole issue that I brought up with the, why a book itself couldn't be authoritative, because that actually doesn't. Everybody's coming up with these different interpretations. Like, what are they going to appeal to that? Like, well, why is yours the right one? And so they don't actually have an authority to. So when you go to Saint Justin Martyr, in 2nd century, and it even says in Scripture, and they continued and maintained the prayers. So there was they're even describing in the New Testament liturgy. It doesn't say, oh, they were praying. It says the prayer, their prescribed way of actually worshiping. And so you get this in Justin Martyr confirmed. You get it in the Didache, and also Justin Martyr confirmed there was a set way of worshiping. So that removes a whole bunch of Protestantism there, that you can basically worship God however you want.
Yeah.
Then You have Saint Ignatius of Antioch, who's the child in Christ's arms described, that becomes the third bishop of Antioch. And he tells exactly, and he's writing under, the apostles themselves. I mean, a lot of, the apostles, so they would have corrected him. And this is one thing that you always see, how do you know it's not just developed? Because when people develop stuff, there's historical evidence, they're called out, always, right? So the burden of proof is on you, like if the apostles and then their succession, and the bishop, if they're not calling out, it means that's exactly what Christ taught. So you switch the burden of proof on them. And Saint Ignatius is writing his epistle in the 2nd century, probably under the time that Saint Barnabas and possibly Saint John is still alive and guiding him. The church is where the bishop is, a valid bishop. So if you're not under the authority of bishop, you're not the church. You don't. And this was something that was really big too, as far as preaching the gospel. So not only did you bring up, you don't even get a Bible for 500-600 years. Those who actually even preached, there was a gospel and stuff, there was stuff around, but it wasn't actually canonized and collected as we have it today for at least 600 years. That those who preach, it wasn't like Protestants actually think that like, oh, just going out and people are preaching the good. You weren't allowed to. And the question was, who sent you? You can't just be like, oh, I heard Jesus, I was listening to the Sermon on the Mount. Now I'm going to go out and baptize and teach people the gospel. You don't have the authority to do that. It was always in terms of being sent. And therefore, the one who had the authority could send. So I think that's really important. That's just to go back to your point that if you certainly look at Protestantism, I forgive me if I offend you guys in the chat, but it's a man-made religion. It's a tradition of men. Like it's just not, it's not present anywhere in history until, 1600 years later. It just does not conform. And I think that's very convincing. When you become a student of church history, you start to realize it's made up. Like this is not anywhere present in the first millennium and even beyond.
I mean, hard words, but as we said, truth by definition is exclusive, right?
Yeah, and sometimes there's tough love, guys. So I do love you. I say this because I love all of you and wish for you to receive the fullness of truth and to be transformed into the image and likeness of Christ as much as possible.
Exactly. Now, here's an interesting question. What challenges, unique and general, does Orthodoxy face today?
Modernization and the influence of secularism among the faithful and even among our leaders. That, what is that phrase that, hold on, I got this. Just give me 1 second. You guys have heard this. Weak men create hard times. Hard times create strong men. Or strong. Well, how's it go? Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times.
Yeah.
That you see this in the life of the church oftentimes, that the church thrives under persecution, and people become lackadaisical when things are good. They lose faith. Things become corrupted. And I think that the strongest challenge for us today is that modernity and postmodernity has produced a lot of conveniences. And especially in the Western world, things are really easy for us. And that can affect one's faith and how one practices. And what I think that has done, and particularly among a lot of Orthodox Christians, is that oftentimes they'll put their trust in the wrong institutions and people, or think that they're friends. I argue this, that the dominating socio kind of political structure is technocracy, and it's a form of what I call modern Gnosticism, and it's thoroughly anti-Christian, anti-human, and it's destructive, and it influences and corrupts both science, medicine, society, faith, right? And unfortunately, people who have not actually undergone severe persecution think that they can actually trust that system. That they're naive. I think that that's the threat of modernity and technocracy, and kind of is the biggest threat to the Orthodox Church today. Not that it'll destroy it, but I mean, just in the lives and salvations people. I'm writing a paper precisely on this. For example, how Christians had handled the Kuf crisis. And I kind of bring a lot of this stuff, both like epistemological considerations, religious considerations, and then give kind of a historical analysis of how science and medicine operates embedded within kind of a socio-political framework that can corrupt it and do various things. And the title of the paper is, "In Whom Do You Put Your Trust?" Like what ultimately, there's going to be many who come to Judgment Day, but Lord, I did. And he's going to say, "Depart from me, I never knew you." Just because you're in the Orthodox Church doesn't mean that you're going to be saved. And so our question today is, where's your citizenship lie? In the kingdom of God? Is that who you trust? Or in secularism? Do you the kingdom of men? And that's a common theme going all throughout the history of the church and in scripture too. And so that for me, I think that's the biggest challenge.
I think that's probably right on the money. Now, just a quick question with what you say with technocracy. A lot of my audience will be sort of familiar with, I've done I think probably a video or two about it, about like managerialism as kind of like outlined by James Burnham. Is it a similar concept to sort of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that. So like the kind of old way was society was kind of managed politically, in which, very depending on what kind of political regime you're in, people had ability to participate in that in some way. And then in, hold on a second. So I have the quote. Because it's from the managerial society. It was let me just make sure. I'm going to just give you a quote so that you know. Was it Thorstein Veblen? No, you're right. It was exactly James Burnham, the Managerial Society. That instead of elected officials in some way, like politics, that the power and decisions, i.e. the management, is James Burnham points out, would give way to technical experts, technical elites in the sciences, who are not actually elected. And that would kind of be So even what is technocracy? Well, in circumstances in which political decisions, they'll tend to, as we've seen that's happened just in the last year, gravitate towards specialized knowledge in the sciences, exercise of technical skills. So even politics becomes subservient to the technical experts, the technical managers. And then therefore technology itself becomes autonomous. It's no longer a tool. It actually, politics becomes a function of systemic structural determinants of which you and I or politics have little control over. But thirdly, technology and science then begins to constitute an entire new way. It's an ideology of thinking that actually mass social domination, dehumanizing practices. That would be technocracy, kind of summed up. And so you see this, for example, let's call it the big pharma corporation, medical, governmental cronyism. That the influence of corporations and funds, right? Rockefeller funds and Carnegie and like these different things that endowments will actually corrupt the way that some of this we first saw like in psychiatric medicines and stuff like that, such that scientific and medical evidence that doesn't fit what they want gets suppressed, right? And so the very way that you practice medicine and try to treat people, let alone actually bringing up like questions about the science in medicine, is all determined by that kind of technocratic structure. I think all of you know where I'm going with this. I don't have to go too far into it, but like we've really seen that what happened in the last year, and it's unfortunate to see that Christians they just blindly like bought into this stuff, to the detriment of other people and society as a whole. So, and the church. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I would largely agree with that. I think that's the big threat to Christianity, to Orthodoxy, is also the big threat to us all, which is largely what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
I would guess maybe, let me think about the question again. Unique challenges, I guess, maybe with Orthodoxy. The only one I can really think of is that this is kind of what you were what tied into what you were talking about earlier, where a sort of embrace of secularism and the downplaying of the faith at the expense of comfort or familiarity or whatever. But I've noticed, particularly here in South Africa, it's much less so in the United States in my experience, but in South Africa, unfortunately, it seems like Orthodoxy is kind of a little bit of an ethnic ghetto, and they're not too fond of, or they can be not too fond of outsiders. Like I have a friend of mine who's he and I are both kind of we're inquirers, and he was like asked. It's a Greek church, and vast majority of the population's Greek at this church, and it's the only one in town. So we go to it. But they're like, hey, like, don't you have like a Catholic church you can go to? And this just doesn't seem to be much of an interest in sort of getting inquirers or sort of reach out. And not at all to say this is true of the church as a whole, because I know from my own experience in the United States, in Alaska, the church that I attended was very keen on education, was very keen on catechizing people, was very keen on not having it just be kind of what your grandma or your grandpa did. But I think that's true of a lot of immigrant denominations, no matter what they are, when they start out. So, but I just feel that it might seem that this is a particular Orthodox problem when really what it is it's just Orthodoxy is new to the West. And you probably saw a lot of these issues before with other denominations, but they've been around long enough now that they've kind of left that behind. So
right.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, thank God I've been in a lot. I think I've never actually experienced it, but I know it's out there. And that part of this has to do with, and this will get probably to our, I'll hold off or go too far into this, to the last question about, unique challenges in America for Orthodoxy. But you have to understand, because Orthodoxy is actually autocephalous, and that most countries, Orthodox countries, that's their national state religion. So when there's immigrants to different countries, the first things first, right? It's not the ultimate goal, but obviously you're going to see how this presents challenges, is they're providing. So obviously South Africa is not Orthodox, right? So if they have immigrants there, the first duty is to protect and preserve. You send a priest there so that they have services, right? Those people who are immigrants from their nation that actually is Orthodox. And there's always going to be that transition period. So that's why a lot of those are going to be very ethnic. And then they have to start transitioning to this mode that we should share the gospel. All are welcome. And those are just kind of practicalities that are sometimes difficult to do, especially if it's, again, the first duty of that bishop and putting a priest there is to look after the faithful. And it's not mutually exclusive, but then to actually spread the gospel. But where it gets difficult is, well, those people only understand or are used to their language, the liturgy done, because it's always done in the common language. And so that kind of presents immediately to people like, whoa, it's ethnic, right? I don't belong to. That's what I thought when I was.
Yeah.
I'm
not Russian. Why would I do this?
Yeah, and that's because then as it grows, that's kind of the transition period, is that reaching out, adopting the other part of the culture and language of the country that you're in. So you're not just looking after like your faithful group that came, but you're now starting to spread. It's strong enough to start evangelizing. That transition period, that's hard. So I think it's just inevitable. I'm sure there's things that we can learn. And I think that, just new times, new ways of kind of presenting the gospel and Orthodoxy. This is what we do in the Discord server. We have people all over the world, kind of appropriating these kinds of means and spreading it. There's just little practicalities and challenges that, I think those are kind of small things. Nobody's ever excluded. It's just, they're difficulties. They're kind of hurdles that.
Yeah. No, I would agree. And here in South Africa, at least, I think it's right on the cusp of sort of making that sort of transition phase, because it was sort of a great church in a overwhelmingly Protestant, and for, a long time, sort of an explicitly Calvinist country. And now we're starting to see a lot more converts. A lot of the people who attend the weekly Bible study that we have or whatever, a lot of them are inquirers, probably, about half of them. And we just ordained a priest who I believe is an Afrikaner, and I think he's probably going to start doing services here in the vernacular. Wow. There's also been a priest who he was actually converted from Catholicism. So first he did the whole gamut. He did the J. Dye route. He was a Presbyterian, and then he became a Catholic. And then after Vatican I, he got a little weirded out by it, and then he sort of became Orthodox. and he translated the whole liturgy into Afrikaans, and he does.
Oh, you mean
Afrikaans.
Vatican II?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, man, he's an old timer, huh?
Yoda, yeah. No, but yeah, Vatican II. And what he did is he did the whole liturgy in Afrikaans, and now like he's the guy who like translated it and whatnot in the world. And now he's got a church out in a small town a couple hours away from here, and yeah, he conducts services, people attend, and so I think it's sort of reached to that point now where it's beginning to make that shift. But yeah, I think ultimately, I think Orthodoxy is a little bit unfairly maligned for that, because, yeah, I mean, I think it's an issue, and I think it should be overcome. Like, the first goal of, the church should be, like you said, the preservation of the faith and making sure that the sacraments are available there for the, the settler community or whatever. But then beyond that, it's got to, really sort of take serious the Great Commission, as it were.
And I think there's a lot that, if you got permission from your bishop and a priest, if there's not a priest, there, that the laity, because there's a lot of people that are like, there is no Orthodox church. I'm a catechumen or an inquirer, and I don't have anywhere to go. There might be a place, when you talk to priests and bishops elsewhere, that, can we start teaching, not as physical teachers, but can we start talking to people about Orthodoxy? Can we, you may even get, a big enough group that interested in that, they'll send somebody down, right? To actually, build a church and have services and stuff like that. So that's something the laity and even inquirers could do, is you could start talking to people about Orthodoxy. Yeah.
And I know in Johannesburg, they actually did just that. They basically they managed to get actually an American priest to sort of come and set up an English parish for them. And that's sort of what they were able to do. But all right, let's continue on with the Questionarinos. So, okay, here we go. So in your estimation, what are the unique strengths and triumphs of Orthodoxy?
We did talk about one unique strength is that just historically, they have been able to go into every place of the world and adopt an understanding of that culture and adopt the language and provide in the common vernacular. And that's actually quite amazing. Even in cultures that, what was the name of the movie where the Roman Catholic missionaries try to go to Japan? And
doesn't that have Liam Neeson in it?
Yeah, Liam Neeson.
No.
And it was really interesting that, it wasn't received, and that they're arguing that, it's because the culture is
silence. That's what it's called. Silence.
The silence, yeah. Or silence, yeah.
Mm.
That our soil is rocky and will not receive Christianity. And it never took, but Orthodoxy did. I find that interesting. There's an Orthodox Church of Japan. And I think there's something really beautiful and strong about Orthodoxy, is that all these different cultures, Orthodoxy, that you might think that is incompatible, Orthodoxy has been able to be planted as seeds and grow and flourish. Whereas everywhere else, all these other religions have failed. That to me is pretty amazing. Let's see. Other strengths. The ability to miraculously transform people's lives. And I thought about that. Again, please forgive me if this is offensive, But, you know, a lot of my friends that remained evangelical, still going to Calvary Chapel, and they're faithful, right? And it's like myself, my intention and love for God, my directedness toward it never changed. I never considered myself non-Christian at any point in my life. I just might be like, well, this group doesn't know what they're talking about, and well, this person's wrong or something like. I was kind of like that, but I didn't go outside of Christianity at all. I knew in my heart of hearts, that I'm like, this is right. I don't know where the church is, and I need to find out who's wrong and who's right. There was kind of more of, but what fundamentally changed to me, again, my desire was always there. And I think a lot of Protestants and Roman Catholics, the same thing. The desire is to love God and the Holy Trinity, but they just don't have the operating system to run that software and program. Or it's very limited. It's like a DOS, right? Or something. It does a few things. But when I came into Orthodoxy, I mean, everything started changing so fast. And I felt like I was a hardware upgrade. I'm like, oh, these are all the tools to fulfill my previous desire and intention. So no offense to the Roman Catholics and Protestants out there. I give you the benefit of the doubt. I actually think most Protestants and Roman Catholics, they're good, God-loving people. It's the system. So I'm critiquing the ideology in the system and not the person. And I want somebody to
doesn't equip you.
Yeah, I want you to be equipped to fulfill your desire and love for God. And so one way that you see that is just how transformative somebody's willing to work the program in Orthodoxy, how much a person's life can be transformed. And it was always kind of shocking to me as I go back to people who are God-loving, evangelicals. And I'm like, they haven't, nothing's happened. They're the same people. I don't mean they're bad people, but there's just like no progress. I'm like, that's weird. And I know that, my sister-in-law included, who was really hesitant to come to Orthodoxy. It wasn't the arguments and the intellectual stuff and the theology that convinced her. It was actually seeing how much my wife and I had changed. And that actually does convince people. The theology is always there, but
yeah, like I said, was the the living testimony of my friend. Like he was a guy apart from like all my other friends. I'm like, there's something different about you, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what it was Orthodoxy and him. And, like with any other denomination, you have your marginal believers, but I think I saw for someone of his age, I had met very few people who had tried to sort of work the program, so to speak. Guys who were living the faith seriously, like they believed it in a pre-modern way, and he was a bright guy too. He was studying physics and whatnot. And I'm like, this is a guy of, with his intellect who is clearly different and transformed in a way that makes him stand out. And I want to know more.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I think that's the thing. I think it has, and I'm not saying, don't look to me as some great moral example, but I think it's nevertheless true that it has the tools there if you want to use them. All you got to do is pick them up and try to faithfully wield them. So
here's another success and triumph of Orthodoxy too. Out of Orthodoxy grew the longest lasting and most successful empire that this world's ever known. There's no government or anything that's lasted and been as successful as what actually Orthodoxy produced. The Byzantine Empire, the Byzantine Roman Empire. I think that's pretty impressive too.
That's quite a track record, from 300 when Constantine to the 1453. That's one heck of a run.
Yeah, there's no competitors. I mean, there were different dynasties and stuff, but one actual form, it's
a long time.
Yeah.
No, I think that's actually a good point. It's sort of showing something that built to last. Yeah. Now, I guess sort of last question before we close here and answer the final questions from the audience. So again, reminder, if you have any last questions, this is the last call. We're going to be ending after this one. So if you have any super chats, send them in. What do you think is the future of Orthodoxy in America and around the world?
America presents I think we kind of hit on this, a unique situation. Because, like I said, and Orthodox countries, that's their official religion for most of them. But America, you have so much immigration, different people from different nations come in. And then I said, like, the first thing is those people need a priest. They need services. So that's actually, how most of the different jurisdictions came in. So what you see is presented a unique jurisdiction, a unique kind of challenge for Orthodoxy is this jurisdictional overlap. And what is it going to mean to really have an American Orthodoxy? And I know people are really frustrated and they want to force that. You cannot force it. Orthodoxy is always organic. And so, because if you force it, it's like, well, okay, it's all going to go under what jurisdiction? The OCA, the EP, Russia, and so there's some good things right now that, because, quote unquote, canonically, you're not supposed to have overlapping jurisdictions, but it still protects us so that when, let's say one jurisdiction starts doing stuff wrong, like, who cares? Like, switch jurisdictions. Like, you don't have to, it won't affect you in any way. And so there's kind of a checks and balances that if you were going to try to force it all into, like, we're doing away with all foreign languages, we're just going to speak American here in Orthodoxy in America, under one jurisdiction, you would have a disaster. You would have far more problems and evils than you can ever imagine. So that has to organically develop. And I know a lot of people go like, well, we need a Western Rite, but Western Rite isn't American. That's not, that's European, it's Western European, right? Orthodoxy in America in the future is going to be uniquely American. It's not going to be forced. It's going to be organic. I imagine it's going to be something like how Americans deal with food. Right, they have all these different cultures coming, and they learn things from the different cultures. But eventually, Americans, they're innovative and they make their own they learn from different cultures, and then they make something distinctly American. Music's like this too. I think that, for me, I mean, I love bluegrass and stuff like that. That's something that's thoroughly American, American folk that but it didn't just pop out of nowhere, right? Like you have these different influences of cultures and stuff like that. I imagine that Orthodoxy would be, I don't know how long it's going to take, but that will be the future in America. The jurisdictional distinctions will be absolved. As it organically becomes, as it spreads throughout, that's another great thing about is that Orthodoxy spreading in America, and that it will evolve naturally through the Spirit of God and working with the people into something that's distinctly American, but thoroughly Orthodox. That's my vision for the future.
It'll be like blues.
Blues. Yeah, that's right.
That's cool, man. No, I think you're probably right. I know this is just sort of I mean, not anecdotal. Well, yeah, a little bit anecdotal, but here in South Africa, I think it is sort of taking on the local flavor a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's becoming something, and it's all within the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. But there's a lot of potential for different communities doing it differently here. So yeah, you'll always probably have the Greek church in Cape Town, but like I said, you got the Afrikaans one, and there's probably going to be an English speaking one here before too long. And before you know it, in given enough time, it'll all sort of become this panoply of varied Orthodox congregations. And I think long term for the church, I'm sort of like short term, like with many things, I guess, kind of like short term to / medium term, relatively pessimistic, but long term more optimistic. Because like you say, well, if we look at Christianity across the West, it's kind of declining a bit. Like a lot of the mainline denominations are losing membership, but one denomination is seeing relatively consistent growth, and that is Orthodoxy. And I know that in the Antiochian Archdiocese of, I think this is a bot here.
Yeah, I was just going to tell you, you're getting spam bot.
Putting timeout, block user, get out of here. Go on, get.
Well, hold on a second. Let's stop this whole conversation. I can win bonus $500. Why are we talking about theology when I could?
Yeah, yeah. Just click the link, man.
Yeah.
All right. Anyways, what was I saying? Oh yeah, but so yeah, as I was saying, I know that the Antiochian Archdiocese in America, something like 80% of the clergy are converts. And I think that's emblematic of the appeal that the timeless truths and traditions of Orthodoxy have. I think it does sort of, because it is a faith which has, I mean, some of these denominations, they've never had hard times. Like, I mean, Pentecostalism, there's not exactly,
or Episcopalians.
or Episcopalians. I mean, there's been no, there's been no hard times for these denominations in the way that Orthodoxy has, like with Muslim conquests and the communism, genocide, more martyrs than any other faith, and so on and so forth. But it's still here, right?
Yeah.
And I think on the back end of that, the church will come out stronger. And a lot of the marginals will sort of maybe drift away and whatever. But I think what's going to be left are going to be the hardcores and the people who take it seriously, the people who allow themselves to be transformed by the faith, who want to embrace, live out theosis, right? They want to be transformed and made more like, Christ. And as more people do that, I think the truth is naturally infectious. People love to see it. People love to see bravery. People love to see conviction, and people love to, people are hungry for this. And I think long-term Orthodoxy's got a pretty bright future, I would say.
Yeah.
But, that's just me.
And I don't know exactly how that works out, that like you said, there's blessing. God allows us to be persecuted because he can bring something good out of that. And you kind of get the separating of the wheat from the chaff. Truth and error become more clear through that. And through persecutions, the church grows and strengthens. But there's always this mystery between how the faithful respond and acquire this the Holy Spirit and react to God, and the kingdom of Satan, the Antichrist, the spirit of the Antichrist. It grows when people fall away of their own choice, stop believing and stop practicing. The evil spirit of the Antichrist grows, and so this is why no man knows the hour, is that there's a synergy and mystery between this, dependent on our free will, that how are the faithful going to react. And, the church has gone through many persecutions, and then triumphed and grew. So I don't know. I think we are going into definitely persecutions, but how long that will last and what that will look like. Also, evil itself is self-destructive.
Yeah.
It has no life-creating force in of itself. And so it ultimately destroys. So, persecutions could be short. It could be long. Like, I have no idea. Like, but as Father Seraphim Rose says, it's a lot later than you think.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, there's like all the those Hal Lindsey books, 88 reasons why the Lord's going to come in 1988, all this sort of stuff. I think you're right though. The hour is going to be later than we think. All right, let's go on here to last questions from the audience. Super chat. We have one from Lambda. What are your thoughts on paganism? So Lambda is kind of a friend of mine, and there's a lot of like pagans sort of, with
like
their
neo-pagans, right?
Yeah, like neo-pagans with their critiques of paganism. Oh, it's, you guys are it's all part of a small hat conspiracy, or it's not,
desert cult.
Yeah, exactly. It's a desert cult. It's weak. It's universalism allows it to be subverted, all that sort of stuff. So I guess, how would you sort of respond to somebody like that?
I'd say that it's Gnostic. So and this will tie into kind of my thesis about what modern Gnosticism is. So the commonality between Gnostics and modern Gnostics is that the problem isn't you or I, it's the world. It's the way the world is created. And therefore, the problem is the world and the creator. So in various forms, there's a deicide, right? There's a rejection of God and what reality actually is. And then the Gnostic creates, through a will to power, because there now is nothing else that grounds that, a fantasy dream world of speculation. And once you've done that, once you've severed your person, your concerns, your very knowledge of life and ethics from the intelligible order of being, i.e. reality, and the ground of that, the transcendent ground that justifies and grounds and holds that into being, God himself, you make yourself God. And that's why it's a will to power, libido dominandi. And so this is why everything becomes politicized. There's nothing more. I think the neo-pagans have that, is that because if all power, right, the way they conceive of weakness and all these various things, it's thoroughly reductive. It's reduced to biology usually. So it's a rejection of actual reality and God. And it's also thoroughly politicized. So the way that they see weakness, and there is no divine element in there, that everything's on man, right? There is, like in a kind of Nietzschean Ubermensch, man is beyond now good and evil. So he's got to make, so for them, Christians, they don't realize that that's a divine human institution. that it isn't something man-made. So that's their false presupposition right there, that it's just some man-made religion. It's like, no, there's really a God, and I can prove that.
It is the revealed faith of the divine. Yeah.
It's the
not
divine.
my God. It's not my religion. It's God's religion.
And so despite the inadequacies of Christians and what to the world, remember it says to the pagans, it's foolishness, right? To the Gentile, right? Yeah. But the trick's on them. Like, it's a trap for them. Our weakness is our strength, right? It's not a weakness. The humility, so they don't have a proper presuppositional starting point and paradigm to actually see reality correctly. So if you have a false paradigm, you're going to see things. Think about it this way. If your presuppositional paradigm is that everybody's a light and cheating, no good, yellow belly, then you're literally just going to even look at facial expressions where somebody's like, be like, look at that man. Did you just see him? Did you? So what's the problem? The problem is your presuppositional commitments and your starting points in your paradigm. I'd argue same with the Gnostic too. What you see as weakness is not weakness. You're actually wrong. Why? Because your paradigm and your presuppositions are wrong. And in fact, it's the strength of, and so for the various reasons, and again, I would identify them as modern Gnostics that are reductive, materialistically, and also I would argue that they are libido dominandi, like a will to power. That they have to make them, once they've destroyed reality conceptually and God, they have to make themselves and their world God. And I would ultimately argue, because of your presuppositional starting points, it makes all ethical claims and knowledge claims impossible. So I just call them, you can't actually say what's weak or strong. You're not in a position to actually say that. No, that would be my critique. Summed up in a 5-minute soundbite. Would I do in 4?
No problem. Yeah, no. I think we've actually got a debate planned with some, or kind of a response to pagans planned later in old Lambda. So I think he'll be taking notes during that section. I'm sure he appreciates the 5-minute soundbite.
Cool. Yeah, hope you like that, Lambda.
Oh yeah, no, that was good. All right, now last one is from a friend of mine. He sent it to me on the old cell phone, but he's kind of an inquirer who, kind of a buddy of mine. But he says, "How can I become Orthodox if I do not believe?" And his first language is not English, so to translate here. But how can I become Orthodox if I do not believe or struggle to fully understand the creed? So I'll say that again. How can I become? Okay.
Or you can read it again for the audience. Go ahead.
Yeah, just for the audience. So how can I become Orthodox if I do not believe or struggle to fully understand the creed?
Do you remember the story in the gospel, the paralytic son and the father who takes his son to Christ, and he says something really interesting. He says, "I believe, help my unbelief." With the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. If you truly desire God, because it wasn't like when I came to Orthodoxy, it was like, well, check. Yeah, well, I agree with that. Right. That there were things that appealed to me, and then there was things that were troublesome to me. I didn't convert when I just checked them all off and they matched my philosophy. I'm like, well, that checks out with my Aristotelian Thomistic scientific anarcho-libertarian theory that I've constructed. So I think that is a beautiful prayer to pray. If you seek God truly in your heart, that's enough. And then pray the prayer, "I believe, help my unbelief." And if that's sincere prayer that you can offer, God will reveal that. And that's the whole life of Orthodoxy, is a constant peeling back of the onion strips, right? This is what the changing is. So even when I came into Orthodoxy, I had things philosophically, politically wrong, that I put first before my faith, that I had to be shown the error of that. And then I stripped that off, and then I found more crud underneath. And I had to dress that and strip that and strip. As struggles, when you first come into Orthodoxy, be like, I'm not sure. Those things are revealed. They'll be shown to you if you knock. That door will be open to you if you have a sincere heart and you say that prayer. I truly believe that.
I think that's great, man. Yeah, and that's good advice for me as well. So, Lord, help my unbelief. I love it. All right, guys. Thank you very much for your time, Father Deacon Ananias. This has been
thank you.
Fantastic, chock full of information. I'm gonna listen back to this because I always get more out of it when I have like a really deep conversation as a listener than as the host because I'm like trying to bounce these things. But this was great. Thank you very much. For last plugs. So for anyone who has not yet, I would highly encourage you to go check out Father Deacon Ananias' YouTube channel, which can be found below in the links. I also have linked to his Patreon. So if you like what you see over there and you want to support his work, by all means. Also, if you want to support this show, there's also links to Subscribestar and PayPal. You can follow me on Twitter. There's also a link to Odyssey for my backup channel. And new material coming out. I have a video due tomorrow on Machiavelli. So this is part 5 of my Machiavelli series. It's going to be on basically military matters as Machiavelli saw it. So yeah, it's going to be on auxiliaries, standing armies, and mercenaries. So that'll be coming out.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Machiavelli's impressive. Like, I'm telling you, like, I don't agree with him, but like, he was one of the best political philosophers or political thinkers out there. Like,
because
you can learn a lot from Machiavelli.
You really can, and I read Machiavelli back when I was an undergrad, and in my libertarian days, and then I read him again like this year and last year, and I was like, I see it now. Like I didn't then, but as I sort of, we saw all the sort of stuff going on over the past couple of years. Yeah, it becomes more true every day. So that'll be coming out. Father Ananias, is there anything you would like to plug? Any new things coming out or anything that I forgot to mention?
We are having an event up here in Montana. Obviously, you're not going to fly out from South Africa.
Most of my audience is in the U.S., though.
Yeah. It is called Orthodox Montanica. That's a combination of Montana and America. To kind of play on words after the Metallica band. So it is the end of this month, July 29th through August 1st. And it's going to have 4 speakers: Jay Dyer, Michael Witkoff, myself, Kotel, David from Church of Eternal Logos. Perhaps a couple more based priests come out. And then we're just surrounded with like good fellowship. We'll have like Friday, Saturday talks, hikes, tours, brewery tours. I, being a professor at Carroll College, get to have that as my venue. And so this is, it's kind of got a lot of people excited because they came out of the trad forum just recently. And so we even had some of the speakers like Roosh and Michael Sisko that were going to come out, but the logistics and work issues weren't able to actually make it out. But hopefully this will become a yearly event if this is successful.
Nice. And like Lollapalooza for Orthodox.
I'll just put in the chat
if you got the link for it, I'll put it in the show notes. But yeah, let me
put
make sure I get it for you.
Right there. So my godfather and I designed that website. I did a little video for that, and so it's like tickets are, if you're early, just put early bird as the code when you register, and you'll get $10 off. So for $35 tickets, yeah, and that helps go to pay for the lunch and the speakers and a donation to the church. So that's about it. And just working on, writing an article for a book that's going to be published later this year. And yeah, that's about it. And just enjoying life in Montana. Hopefully I'll get some more streams, getting active again on doing streams like yourself. So that's about it. Not much beyond that.
That's awesome. Hey, and I'm just looking for this link. I don't see it, man. Did you put it in the posted in the comment section?
Yeah, it's right before Optimus 777.
Oh.
I could send it to you.
It's not. Yeah.
Let me send it to you.
I think maybe send it in the private chat. Yeah. Because I think the algorithm, I think it's like solicitation or something. All right, there
it is. Okay. It is solicitation, so it was right. At the
but it's the solicitation we want.
Yeah,
I'll put that there. There we go. Hey, there we go. All right, and also again, I'll put this for ease of access in the description as well, so you guys can reach it there. All right, thank you very much, guys.
Awesome.
This has been Mr. Patriarch, and I hope to see you guys again soon. And thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.
Brother. God bless, guys.
Patriarch out.